Hello! Please ignore my nails. It's been about a week since I did them, so they look like crap right now. This is my second attempt at recording this. The first attempt was a couple of days ago, when my nails still looked good. um, so I tried to record this video, and then the computer crashed, and the file was lost. Um, which is unfortunate. So if I seem a bit more rehearsed, I guess, than usual, it's because I've already talked about this section of the book. Um, but uh, but I haven't read the next section yet, so so these are still my sort of raw, unspoiled thoughts. Um, so, section 2 of The Way of Kings is an interesting section because it doesn't have a lot of plot in it. Like, not a lot happens. Um, it's it's a very setup section. It's clearly setting things up for the future, and my personal guess is that the next section of the book, part 3, is going to be like a massive escalation. That's sort of the vibe I'm getting so far. But despite not a lot happening, this was the section where I wrote the most notes out of any section of any book I've done so far. Because I do have a lot of thoughts. I'm gonna try to break it up sort of by plot line. So let's start with Caledon. Caledon, I have not that much to say about here because really it's just a continuation of where his story was already going in the previous part, but a very good one. Um, I really like the pacing and the speed at which Caledon's story is progressing. It's not too fast. But it's also not like a slog. Like every chapter is a new development. Um, in his attempt to sort of unify Bridge 4 under his leadership. Uh, but it also doesn't feel like Sanderson is essentially cheating to get to the good part, as it were. Like he is making Caledon and by extension the reader earn the what I presume will be catharsis of Caledon's success eventually. Um, so I do enjoy Caledon's story. I don't have a ton to say about it in this section. The main things I have to say are sort of unrelated to each other, so I'll just sort of list them out. One, Caledon is definitely using whatever power Seth has. Like he's doing the thing where he draws Stormlight into himself to gain power, as evidenced by the charged spheres becoming empty after he miraculously survives a bridge run. So clearly that's going to be the kind of power that Caledon is going to have. And I say the kind of power because it's already clear that this setting has multiple magic systems, because there's also the whole Soulcaster thing that Jasna's doing. Um, so I think that's fairly obvious, and I also think that it's probably something that Sanderson expects us all to notice by this point. Like I don't think it's meant to be a surprise whenever it's going to happen later on. Um, but it is sort of nicely, subtly brought in. Um, the other thing about Caledon that I noticed is there's a lot going on with Caledon and mental health. First of all, Caledon has clinical depression, and it specifically predates all of the tragedy in his life. Like, it's not like his depression is caused by all the tragic things happening in his life. We see him being depressed even as a child in his flashbacks. So I'm hoping that Sanderson has sort of maybe wised up a bit with his depictions of mental health since Elantris. I don't think he's had any major screw ups since then. So I think he might have. I think he's improved a lot on this. So I'm optimistic about how that will be portrayed. There's also the part where Syl asks Caledon about what madness is, and basically Caledon defines it as behavior that is outside of what is expected from the people, like in the society that you live in, which I think is a really interesting way to define mental illness. It's essentially a sort of social constructivist theory of mental illness, which I do largely agree with. I mean, it depends on the form of neurodivergence we're talking about, but certainly for a lot of things that we classify that way, it does end up being more a case of something that society isn't willing to accommodate more than something that is inherently an issue. But yeah, I do appreciate that. But that's about it. That's about everything I have to say about Caledon. Like I said, not a lot going on here, even though I do enjoy Caledon's chapters the most. There's just not a lot to say about them. They're just really good. The other major storyline going on here is told through two point-of-view characters, Dalinar and Adolin. And they are a mixed bag. Dalinar is a really promising and interesting character so far. I really like a lot of what's sort of being... The things that the groundwork is being laid for with Dalinar. I enjoy the mystery of why he doesn't remember his wife, what happened in his past that makes him feel so guilty, who or what is speaking to him in his head. Is it actually God, or is it something else? To me, the way that the thing that speaks to him speaks is really reminiscent of the way that Ruin would speak to people in Hero of Ages. Like specifically some of the spook chapters in Hero of Ages I'm reminded of. So I'm thinking that it might be a similar sort of situation, like a similar kind of divine entity speaking to him. I enjoy the idea of a very powerful nobleman, arguably the second most powerful person in his country politically, who is basically coming to realize just how messed up and oppressive and non-functional the system that he is an integral part of is. We'll see whether Sanderson fully follows up on that, because Sanderson has a history of sort of taking a both sides are equally right and wrong approach to class conflict, which I don't think is right. I don't think that's a good approach to that particular issue. And so far, he hasn't done it here. Like, so far, he has not portrayed... Like, he has not made any arguments that the light eyes are, like, also kind of right. And I hope he never does, because they're not. There is literally no possible thing that could excuse the treatment of dark eyes in this series. In this book, I mean, so far. And I hope he doesn't try. I hope he very firmly sticks to the idea that this is a horrifically evil, oppressive system. But again, I won't be too shocked if he doesn't, because that's just sort of what I've come to expect from Sanderson. But on a lighter note, I like everything about Dalinar, basically. I enjoy his chapters. Adolin, on the other hand, is a bit bland. Like, there's not much there for me to grab onto character-wise. He's just not very developed so far. And in a different book, he'd be fine as like a protagonist, but when he's placed next to Caledon, Shallan, and Dalinar, who are fantastically well realized characters with incredibly strong characterization, he really sticks out like a sore thumb. So I don't know what. So I'm sort of wondering whether Adolin is going to remain one of our main characters throughout the series, or if he's just sort of thrown in here as a point of view, as sort of an external point of view on Dalinar. So we get to see Dalinar from the outside. Because Dalinar is very unconventional for the Alethi nobility, and I think Adolin provides us sort of the conventional view among the Alethi nobility, and sort of a look at Dalinar that points out all the ways in which he doesn't fit in. So Dalinar's point... Whoa, camera. So Adolin's point of view is valuable here, but it's not very interesting. So I'm hoping either that changes, like either he becomes more interesting over time, or he stops being a major character. And I won't find out for a while, because the next section is just Shallan and Caledon, like from what it says at the beginning of the section of the book. So I won't be going back to Dalinar and Adolin for a while. I don't know if I believe that Dalinar is going to go through with abdicating in favor of Adolin, just because it feels like that would be, like, unless something really drastically unexpected happens afterwards, that would kind of kill Dalinar's storyline, because he'd just, like, go and retire and be retired at his estate back in Alethkar. And I don't think that's where we're going with this. So I'm guessing something will stop him from abdicating. But it's hard to guess, because the main plot hasn't actually been introduced yet. I still don't know what this book is about. And I'm like almost 50% of the way through the book. And that's not necessarily a criticism, because everything so far is really engaging, and at no point am I like, damn, I wish the main plot got started already. It's just interesting that Sanderson is taking his time so much with that, because that has historically not been the case. Like, in every other Sanderson book so far I've read, you are able to give a basic blurb of the main, of like, what the, like a basic spoiler-free blurb, obviously, of what the plot is about, easily within the first 100 pages. Here, definitely not. I'm like almost 500 pages in, and no idea what this story is actually about. Which is exciting. I'm interested to see where that goes. Sorry, text message. But it also makes my job here a bit harder, because it's more difficult to talk meaningfully about the plot when I don't know what the plot is yet. That being said, the third thing I want to talk about is all of the miscellaneous little hints throughout this that feel like they are definitely hinting at either the plot of the Stormlight Archive or the overarching Cosmere plot. I still don't know if those two are separate, really. Like, I still don't know if the plot of the Stormlight Archive isn't itself essentially the main plot of the Cosmere. I don't know how that's gonna work. But the main thing here, of course, are the little snippets at the beginning of each chapter, which are clearly from the perspective of some kind of Cosmere spanning person. because he mentions in one of them, he mentions Cell, which is I believe that's the name of the world that Elantris is on. My guess is that the person speaking in those little snippets is Hoid, because he mentions, I'm gonna say he because again I'm assuming it's Hoid, because he mentions that the people he's talking to are chasing him or hunting him, and we know from the what's the name, the Pure Lake section in the previous part of the book, that there are in fact some mysterious people hunting Hoid. So I don't know what Hoid is doing. I do have a theory that I'll get to at the end of this. But here are some of the quotes from maybe Hoid. We'll assume it's Hoid for now. So he says at one point that race holds the most terrible of all the shards, and that he had a brief visit to Cell, again the world of Elantris, and then he says, Aeona and Sky are both dead, and that which they held has been splintered. Now, Aeona is the name that instantly makes me think of Aeons, which is the magic system of, or at least one of the magic systems of Elantris. So I'm guessing that Aeona is tied to Elantris. I don't know. I have so little context for this, but these are the sort of vague connections I'm making in my head and looking out for going forward. So I'm going to be looking out for mentions of Aeona and mentions of race, and also Sky, apparently. What else is there? And then there's Axies the Collector. Axies the Collector also strikes me as... Well, Axies the Collector is interesting. I'm unsure if Axies the Collector is going to be absolutely central to the main plot, or if he's a one-off character that's just there to flesh out the world. I'm literally 50-50 on that, because there's potential there for both. It could be either of those things. I have no idea. So those are and of course there's Dalinar's visions. Dalinar's visions, which tell him to unite them and so forth. So I don't know what this is all going to unite. What? Is he supposed to unite the High Princes as he assumes? Or is he supposed to unite something more fundamental? Is he supposed to unite... Well, actually, here's a thought that just occurred to me while I'm speaking right now, actually. So you're getting... See, there's a benefit to the fact that the old video got corrupted. So the shard blades and shard plate are called shards for a reason. They're shards of something. And shards can potentially be brought together to remake the whole that they are shards of. What if that's what he's supposed to unite? And what if that's what Gavilar was trying to doing? What the hell? What if that's what Gavilar was trying to do, and that's why he was so interested in the Parshendi, because he realized they had shards, and he knew for some reason, maybe because he had similar visions, that he had to bring all the shards together. That could be a possible interpretation of the whole unite them thing. But yeah, that's about as much as I can guess about where this is going. I'll see how long it takes me to actually figure out more details. But for the end, I guess I'm just gonna throw out some random thoughts I had that don't really fit into any of these larger themes. One, Uh, Dalinar mentions that his Shardblade is called Oathbringer. I believe Oathbringer is the name of either book 2 or 3. I don't remember, like one of the next 2 books. I'm guessing that book is going to focus on Dalinar, just like this one focuses on Caledon, just based on that title. I don't really have anything more to say about that other than that I think I've guessed that correctly. Next, I really like the reveal that by fulfilling Gavilar's dying wish, Seth accidentally kind of defamed his reputation by implying that Gavilar was literate. And that's definitely not something Seth would have been thinking of at that point. But it's really funny to me that that's sort of like, that now like all of Gavilar's family is like, oh my god, how did he learn how to read? When that was entirely not intentional. I'm actually really, like, I would not have thought of that, but I'm really glad that Sanderson thought of that little bit of consistency there in the world building. I find it very amusing. Next, people have visions right before death. Like, there's a character here who says some weird things right before they die. I can't remember exactly who, actually. Maybe one of the members of Bridge 4, I think. Like, shouts out some really ominous stuff before he dies. But the previous section, like the snippets at the beginning of the chapter, were all quotes from people right before their death. And all of those quotes were like from a couple of, like, within 2 years of each other, because there were dates on them. So what I'm wondering is, does that only happen on the Shattered Plains? Do people who die on the Shattered Plains specifically have these visions? And that's why these visions are being gathered now for the past couple of years, because before that there weren't people dying on the Shattered Plains constantly, because the Vengeance Pact hadn't started yet? Or is it just random people anywhere in the world who die? Or is it people who are killed by the Parshendi? I don't know. We'll see about that. Let's see what else is in here. I really enjoy the way that sort of rather than just having a bunch of fantasy races, Sanderson just has a bunch of human races, like races in the real world sense, which just have fantastical qualities, but they're still considered human. Like, there's people with blue skin, there's people with the nails made of rock, there's people with long white eyebrows, and obviously the Alethi also have weird stuff going on with both their eyes and their hair. Like, the genetics there clearly don't work like they do in the real world. So I like that. I think more fantasy settings should do that. I've heard that Malazan does something similar, but I can't think off the top of my head of any other fantasy setting that just includes traits that in the real world cannot happen naturally in humans, and just makes them a regular part of humanity in that world. As like, just, oh, that some ethnic groups just have this weird trait that no one in the real world has. I think that's cool. Next, I feel silly for not predicting or guessing that Shinovar has soil. I feel like I should have guessed, between the fact that Seth was so upset by the fact that everyone in Alethkar walks on rocks, and the fact that later chapters established that rocks are all there is to walk on, that there is no soil. If I had gone back and reread the opening Seth chapter a bit later in the book, when I knew that there was no soil anywhere in the world, I probably would have made the connection that if the Shin people don't believe in walking on stone, they must have soil. But I didn't. I completely forgot about that little detail that Seth mentioned by the time that I realized there was no soil elsewhere. Um, and and that little chapter that happens in Shinovar here, the little interlude, also gave me the fantastic phrase, drooling, wall-staring, imbecile grass. I just really like that phrase. Anyway, actually no, I was going to say the final thing I have to say, but I have one more thing to say actually. The thrill that Dalinar and Adolin talk about, which is, it seems like it's just regular adrenaline, like just naturally occurring adrenaline in battle. But the way they talk about it, and the way attention is drawn to it, and the way it's capitalized, and the way that they're like not supposed to talk about it to each other, makes me think it might be more than just adrenaline. Like, what if the Alethi in particular, like as a nation, as an ethnic group, have been cursed slash blessed by some sort of godlike power with this thing, where they like go into a specific kind of battle rage? Like, what if that's not just them placing adrenaline and battle rush on like a pedestal culturally? What if it's an actual thing? I'm not sure if I think it is, but I'm leaving that open as a possibility. And now the actual final thing I want to talk about. The King's Wit. The King's Wit, first of all, is a fantastic concept. The idea of the king having a professional asshole who insults people professionally and who it's legal to murder is amazing. I love that fact. That's like fantastic world building. Reminds me of some of the stuff in the Pure Lake, where I also loved all the world building. But I have a crazy crackpot theory that I'm not even going to say it's probably not true, because I do think it's true, but I have no basis for that. Like, it's literally just a vibe, I guess. If I'm right about this, I'll be very happy. My theory is the King's Wit is Hoid. Again, nothing to base that on. It's just the vibe I'm getting. Like the sort of role he plays in the story as this like minor missable character who's just kind of there for comic relief reminds me of the way Hoid was used in previous books. His personality reminds me of what little of Hoid we got in previous books. And the fact that he has no name, and I think Adolin or Dalinar mentioned that he just kind of appeared out of nowhere, like they don't really know who this guy is. All of this really seems to point towards him being Hoid to me. Maybe that's supposed to be obvious, and I'm just very, very dumb. And I think it's a crazy crackpot theory when in reality I'm supposed to think that. Or maybe I've cracked the code. Or maybe I'm completely wrong. We'll see we'll see where I end up with that. But that's what I'm throwing out there for now as my theory. The King's Wit is Hoid. Let's see if I'm right. Anyway, I'm gonna read the third part of the book now, which I'm very excited for because it has Shallan in it again, and not Adolin. And I like Shallan, and I don't like Adolin. So I'm going to enjoy that, hopefully. And I'm also hoping that this is the part where Caledon's story really comes to a head. So yeah, I'm gonna go read that, and bye!